All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. My name is Dan Scheiman. I'm the Bird Conservation Director for Audubon, Arkansas, State Office of the National Audubon Society, a nonprofit bird conservation organization. I've been with Audubon for 15 years now, and one of the joys of my job is sharing my knowledge and my love for birds with other people. And the impetus for tonight's talk came from some of the questions that I received, like, what do birds do at night? Are they sleeping? Where are they sleeping? Those kinds of things. So I thought I would tell you more about the nightlife of birds. So it may or may not be dark where you are right now, but imagine that the sun is going down. The moon is coming up and you find yourself alone in the woods. Suddenly, you hear a horrible scream. And a ghostly figure flies over your head. Whoa! Well, it's not a ghost. It's a barn owl, one of the most widely distributed birds in the world. This species is found on every continent except Antarctica. But I really think that the barn owl is responsible for the legend of the banshee, because imagine this white, pale, ghostly thing flying over your head at night and screeching. How is that not a banshee? This owl occupies a broad range of habitats from urban to rural, mostly at lower elevations, but can even be found high up in the Andes Mountains in South America. And it's because it has such a huge range, it's just found, has a real broad north to south range as well. Barn owls love to catch small mammals, their favorite prey, mice, rats, voles, that kind of thing. So they like to be around people where they find a lot of pest animals. And as their name suggests, they nest in barns, as well as tree stumps, cliffs, caves, riverbanks, barn lofts, haystacks, nest boxes as well. You can build a big nest box to meet the barn owl's needs. And then I took this photograph of a nest in a deer stand in eastern Arkansas. Another owl found out across North America is the great horned owl, named for those ear tufts on the top of its head. Of course, those are just feathers. It's not the owl's ears. Note also the bird's yellow eyes and that white V on the chest. Great horned owls give the stereotypical owl hooting. Now, don't confuse that hooting with the mourning doves call, the Generally, great horned owls are not calling in the middle of the daytime. Great horned owls take a variety of prey, from scorpions to rodents to hares and rabbits, also large birds, ducks, geese, herons, and they are famous for taking on skunks. Yeah, most birds don't have much of a sense of smell, so great horned owls don't care if they get sprayed. They will kill and eat a skunk if they can get one. Great horned owls live in a wide variety of habitats all across North America, so they also nest in a wide variety of situations. Sometimes they'll take over an old crow or hawk nest. They may nest in the top of a broken off stub. In the desert, they will nest in a cactus. That'll work too if there's no trees around. Or even in a cliff crevice. Another owl, it's widely distributed across North America, is the barred owl. Note the black eyes, the round face, and then the barring that's on the throat and the barring on the chest, those stripes on the chest. Barred owls like bottomland hardwood forests, wet woods, sloughs, that kind of thing. They say, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? That's not all they say. I love it when barred owls get all riled up. They sound like monkeys in the trees. It's really neat. Barred owls will nest in tree cavities, broken off tree stumps, and even in big nest boxes built especially for them. And a small owl species that we have around here is the eastern screech-owl. Note its yellow eyes. It also has ear tufts. And unlike any other owl in North America, it comes in two different color forms, either red or gray. Screech owls, they will live in rural and urban areas. They can occur in the Rockies. They occur from the boreal forests of Canada all the way down to the Tropic of Cancer in Mexico. So they also have a pretty broad range. Screech owls, they do screech, but mostly they whinny and trill, kind of like a, you know. One method for getting songbirds to come out of hiding is to play or imitate a screech owl, and they'll want to come out and find the predator and mob that predator. You could have a screech owl close by and not even see it. They're so well camouflaged. Sometimes in the daytime, they will hang out at the entrance to their roosting and nesting cavity, but they're so well camouflaged, you wouldn't even know they're there. So owls have a number of adaptations that let them hunt successfully at night. First, they're famous for being able to fly silently so they can sneak up on their prey. They have a lot of soft feathers and serrated feather edges so that the air passes gently through their feathers so they don't make sounds when they flap their wings. They have excellent vision too. Owls' eyes are huge. If our eyes were the same proportion as an owl's eyes, they'd be as big as tennis balls. Because they're so big, they are fixed in the owl's head. The owl can't move its eyes left and right like we can. So to see around, the owl has to move its head. And no, an owl cannot move its head around 360 degrees. Only up to 270 degrees. And it does this because it has a whole lot more vertebrae in its neck than we have, so it has a lot more flexibility than we do. Also, it has special arrangements of the blood vessels in the neck, the jugular, so it can't knock itself out by cutting off blood to the brain when it twists its head around. But they also do have good binocular vision because their eyes are facing forwards. So they can really see their prey and get it. And then, of course, they have excellent hearing. And Their ears, of course, are on the side of their head, like all birds. But what's really neat is that their ears, the left and right ears, are different shapes. They're facing different directions to help to capture sound coming from different ways. And that way they can pinpoint the sound because their ears are kind of focused in slightly different directions. And not only that, their ears are offset a little bit. One's a little bit higher on the side of the head than the other, which also helps them to pinpoint where prey is coming from, because they can really differentiate where a sound is. But owls are not the only nocturnal birds hunting at night. If you've been out in the woods at night, you may be familiar with the following birds. Maybe if you've been camping in the southern US, you've heard this bird. Maybe it's even driven you nuts while you're trying to sleep. That, of course, is an eastern whippoorwill. Whippoorwill being an onomatopoeic name for the sound the bird makes. And whippoorwills are members of the nightjar family, also known as goat suckers, although they do not suck milk from goats. Whippoorwills are nocturnal birds, and you can see they're well camouflaged. They live in forests. And during the daytime, they roost on the ground and on branches, and they are very, very hard to see when they're roosting. But they're easy to hear. Whippoorwill, whippoorwill, whippoorwill. On a night with a full moon, they can just sing all night long. And these birds nest on the ground. Although they really don't build a nest, they just lay their eggs on the forest floor, but their eggs and their young are really well camouflaged, so they're very hard to find. And there's another nightjar out there that you may have heard, or you may have heard this bird and called it a whippoorwill when it is not a whippoorwill. So listen closely to the difference here. Chuck-will's widow. Chuck-will's widows are bigger than whippoorwills, but they occupy similar habitats, and there is an area where the two ranges overlap a great deal. Listen to the cadence, rhythm of their song. Chuck-will's widow. Widow. Different than the it's different than the whippoorwill, whippoorwill, whippoorwill. Chuck-will's widow, Chuck-will's widow. Like the whippoorwill, Chuck-will's widows are active at night, roosting on the ground or on tree branches during the daytime. They also just lay their eggs right on the forest floor. Even though it looks like whips and chucks have very small bills, they actually have very big gapes. And that's because they are aerial insectivores. They catch insects on the wing. And that big mouth allows them to scoop up the insects. And also notice those hair-like feathers around the edge of the mouth. Those are called rictal bristles. And it's thought that those either help to funnel the insects into the mouth or maybe prevent insects from hitting the eyes, or maybe both. And whippoorwills and chuck-will's widows do need some light in order to see and capture their prey. So they're active at dawn and dusk, and they're most active on full moon nights than new moon nights. And then there's a third member of the nightjar family. It's pretty widespread in North America, the common nighthawk. Although it's a lousy name because, of course, it's not a hawk, and it's actually not really all that active at night. It's more crepuscular, which means highest period of activity at dawn and dusk. Again, when you can see to hunt. Also, the nightjar most likely to be active during the daytime. This is the species that you're most likely to see flying high up in the sky over cities and towns. The whippoorwills, chuck-bill's widows, they're forest birds, and they feed low over the ground, usually within the forest canopy for insects. But nighthawks, they hunt way up in the sky looking for their prey. And if you see birds at night around bright lights, like at stadiums and shopping malls, those are common nighthawks. Look for their real aerodynamic pointed wings and those white wing slashes. Really distinctive. They have just such a different shape compared to the whips and the chucks. And they have a really different sound too. Their vocalization is just a real weak peeping sound. But when the males are displaying for the females, they do this power dive. And when they pull up from this power dive, the sound of the air rushing through the wings makes this mechanical sound, like a. It's really cool, real startling when you hear it in real life. So I'm going to play the sound of a common nighthawk and then listen for that dive. There's widow in the background. That is so cool. Again, and that's a mechanical sound. That's the air rushing through the wings. Really cool. So, what are diurnal birds doing at night? When the nightjars and the owls are active, what are our daytime birds doing? Well, a variety of things. Of course, many of them are sleeping at night. Where are they sleeping? Under cover. In trees, in bushes, in nest boxes, sometimes on power lines. Some birds will roost together in big numbers because there's safety in numbers. Some birds, like purple martins, are famous for their massive nocturnal roosts. After the breeding season, but before migration southwards, purple martins will spend a few weeks where they're just feeding all across the landscape, fattening up for migration. But at night, martins from a wide area come together and roost in one spot. It may be a group of trees, and it's such a sight to see. This photograph was taken on Lake Washita in central Arkansas, and there's an island, aptly named Bird Island, where hundreds of thousands of purple martins come to roost in August, late July, August, September is kind of the time frame. And if you're out there on a boat, you see them starting to stream in from all different directions in small groups, then bigger groups as the sun's going down. And then there's this massive swarm of birds circling like a tornado around their roost site. And then as it really starts to get dark, they all just start going into the trees and they weigh the branches down with all their bodies. It is really a wonder to see. Not all birds are sleeping when they're supposed to be. Sometimes they're things, sometimes they are singing instead of sleeping. Some of you have probably experienced this, especially mockingbirds. They are notorious for singing at night. So why are they doing this? Why aren't they sleeping? Well, the thing is, at the beginning of the breeding season, their hormones are flowing. The male's hormones are flowing. They want to defend their territory. They want to attract the female. And in our suburban and urban areas, even at night, it can be pretty bright with all of our street lights and porch lights. So the birds figure, if I can see and be seen, I might as well keep on singing and get my message out there. They're stimulated by that lighting to keep on singing. But that is not the whole story, at least not for all species. There was a study done on European robins, and it was found that European robins that live in cities shifted the main part of their singing activity to night, whereas the robins that were living in nearby countrysides still sang mostly during the daytime. And the thought is that the robins living in the cities, they were having a hard time getting their message across in these dense, noisy areas. You know, there's car horns and construction equipment and all sorts of things going on. The birds really can't be heard. So they started singing at night when it's much quieter. Studies also found that birds living in urban areas sing louder and sing at higher frequencies compared to birds singing in rural areas. And these are ways that they get their voice heard, their point across in our noisy urban environments. So the next time you were bothered by a bird singing at night, just remember how much noise pollution we humans make that birds have to put up with day in and day out. Perhaps the most surprising thing that birds do at night is migrate. Now, not all birds migrate at night. Raptors, waterfowl, cranes, and other birds, they migrate during the daytime. But all songbirds, woodpeckers, and many other species do migrate at night. Now, why should they migrate at night? Well, there's a few reasons. First is, of course, it's dark, right? They can't see their prey to feed, so you might as well feed during the daytime, refuel, rest then, and then migrate at night when you can't eat. Also at night, they're hidden from their predators too. Not all predators, but hawks and falcons and stuff can't see them, so they're a little bit safer at night. And then also generally, the air tends to be calmer, cooler at nighttime, so it's easier for them to fly at night than during the daytime. Now, how do we know that birds are migrating at night? Well, for a long time, we sure did not know that was happening until the invention of radar. And when radar was invented, the radar technicians started seeing these explosions, these like donuts that would appear during spring and fall just around sunset. And what scientists figured out is that these were massive concentrations of birds rising up from the trees to start migrating north or south. And nowadays, ornithologists can use radar to track bird migration. We have indices of abundance, how many birds are approximately up in the sky and migrating, where are they coming from? And the Cornell Lab of Ornithology even offers a birdcast, kind of like a forecast for bird migration to let you know when bird migration is picking up and when you should go outside and look for migrating birds in your area. We've come a long way. You can also tune in to migrating birds. You can listen in to what's going on with microphones. There are plans for building your own flower pot microphone to put on your roof and listen to these birds going by overhead in the nighttime. And what's really cool is that birds make special sounds only during nocturnal migration. Little chips and churs and burrs and warbles that they make at no other time, only when migrating at night. And if you have a recording, there are programs out there where you can feed your recording in and it will identify the type of bird. There's even a CD, may not be a CD form anymore, but a CD about the flight calls of migratory birds. And there's a website dedicated towards migratory bird calls and helping you to learn to identify the bird calls at night. So if you go to a quiet area at night, maybe a hilltop is a good spot. You're a little bit closer to the birds that way, away from sound pollution of cities. you may just hear birds going overhead. And although in some respects it is safer to migrate at night, that does not mean that birds don't face any threats. And the biggest threat to migrating birds is us. It's our cities. Birds are attracted to light. Birds use the light of the moon, the stars, during the sun as well, during the daytime, to help them to orient and navigate. And so when they see bright lights in our cities, they can become confused and they are attracted and go towards those lights. And they will fly around those bright lights, circling endlessly until they tire themselves out and fall to the ground, or until they hit a structure and collide and fall to the ground. Here's a picture of the Twin Tower memorial lights just after 9/11. Those bright spotlights shining in the sky were a tremendous magnet to birds. All those little dots you see there, those are all birds just circling endlessly in those beams of light. They're trapped, essentially. Fortunately, once scientists figured out that was going on, ornithologists stepped in, worked with the city of New York, and when birds started to congregate in those lights, and birders were watching, volunteering to watch the lights, they would shut the lights off for a little bit and let the birds carry on, and then turn the lights on again. So there was a compromise back then. That's a good thing. All sorts of birds are vulnerable to colliding with our buildings during the nighttime. There's a variety of species in this photo here. Blue jays, mourning doves, woodcock, blackbirds, thrushes, woodpeckers, warblers, lots and lots of migrating birds. Hawks are in this too. They're all susceptible. And this is a group of birds that were collected around Toronto, I believe, on a few nights. One of the biggest threats to birds is collisions with man-made structures. Not only buildings, but also communication towers, and back in the day, lighthouses and that kind of thing. Fortunately, there are efforts to reduce collisions with night migrating birds. Across the country, Audubon entities are working with cities and building managers on lights out campaigns. And now we're not turning off all the lights in the city all spring long. No, we're just targeting the lights that are at the tops of the tallest buildings where the birds are migrating. And it's targeted for just the few weeks where the peak migration is happening, and just in the middle of the night when the birds are going by. So most people are asleep and don't even notice it. So we're not really talking about significantly changing the night skyline of these cities. It's a good compromise, again, to help birds out. And this is happening across the country. You can find lights out programs in Chicago, Indianapolis, Minneapolis, of course, New York City, Columbus, Milwaukee, Toronto, and more. Maybe there's a lights out program where you live. Maybe there isn't. I live in Little Rock. There are plenty of bright buildings in Little Rock. Maybe it's time for a lights out Little Rock program so that more songbirds can live to see another sunrise. I appreciate everyone's time and attention. Past webinars are online now at Audubon Arkansas's website. We've created a special COVID-19 section where we're posting webinars, past and announcements for future webinars, posting educational activities, videos, and more. So we want to give you things to do. I know these are scary times. Can be frustrated being inside a lot, but I hope it will take some comfort in birds like I do. So watch birds in your yard or wherever it's safe to do so. And now I will be happy to answer some of your questions. So I'm going to go to the chat box. So someone's asking, are oil birds a type of nightjar? Yes, oil birds are a species of nightjar, and oil birds are found in Central America, I believe. And I think oil birds, Central America and the Caribbean, I believe, they nest in caves. Some nightjars nest in caves, not on the forest floor. There's a lot of protection in caves. There are other groups of other types of birds are in the nightjar family, like frogmouths and owlet nightjars, and all sorts of cool birds around the world. What does nightjar mean? That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure about that. It must have something to do with their nocturnal activities. Let me see if I can look that up or have my amazing Facebook partner figure that out and post the answer on our Facebook page. Can you hear birds migrating at night if you live in a city or a suburb? Yeah, probably. Maybe not with your own ears, but if you get a microphone that's more powerful at capturing sound and put it on your roof or hold up to the sky on a quiet night, yeah, it'd be possible to hear the birds going overhead if they're doing that. So the owls that come in dark brown and white mate with each other. Oh yeah, so Eastern screech owls come in two different color forms, the gray and the red, and yeah, they'll interbreed with each other. There's nothing separating them. It's like blonde and brown hair for people. How many babies do owls have? Well, that number varies depending on the species, but I think they have pretty big clutches, from 4 to maybe up to 10, something like that. Not an expert on owl clutch size, but they're pretty big. Are any bird species homosexual? Not that I know of. I mean, sometimes male birds will have a pair bond, especially pet birds, parrots, and that kind of thing. And in some species, the role of the sexes is reversed. In most bird species, in many bird species, they're monogamous, one male, one female, but in many more bird species, one male mates with many females, and the female raises the young. But there are a few species where it's reversed. The female is more brightly colored than the male, and the female does the courting, attracts the mate. When they will copulate, the female will lay her eggs, and then she'll leave the male to tend the eggs and the young, and she'll go off and find another male. Is it unusual to see an owl in the yard in the morning? No, not necessarily. Owls, of course, they will roost in trees and shrubs during the daytime. They try to stay inconspicuous, but there may be an owl first thing in the morning that's out in the open that just hasn't gone to sleep yet, especially when they're nesting and they are really working hard to find food for their young. Then they can be active for a lot longer than just during the night. And sometimes, like, barred owls tend to be a little more diurnal than the other owls, and you'll see them moving around or hear them calling in the middle of the daytime. Other than mockingbirds, what other songbird males sing at night for a mate? I've heard people tell me starlings can be quite noisy in the middle of the nighttime. I have not heard of other birds doing that, but I would not be surprised if that was going on. Cardinals also seem to be pretty vigorous singers during the breeding season. Someone has said, let's see. Are owls common in suburban areas? Well, not necessarily common, but yeah, they're found in suburban areas. I'm in suburban Little Rock, and on rare occasion, I will hear a great horned owl. I think in part that's because I'm not too far from a city park, where there's just more trees and more habitat, more cover for the owl. But certainly, great horned owls and screech owls are pretty flexible and will live in our suburban and urban areas. Barred owls like more forested areas. Barn owls tend to be in more rural areas, but sometimes they'll be in cities. Are windmills harmful to birds? So wind turbines can be a threat to birds. Birds can collide with the turbines. That's why it is important to properly site turbines so that they are not in major migratory pathways. But the number of birds that are killed at wind turbines is far dwarfed by the number of birds that collide with our buildings and communications towers, and the number of birds that are killed by cats. Number of birds that collide with windows too. Window collisions are a major threat to birds. Are ducks nocturnal? Well, ducks don't migrate at night, but yeah, they can sometimes be active at night. A lot of birds sleep in the form of micro naps. So just short periods during the daytime, or they may close one eye and shut down half their brain so they can keep the other eye open and be vigilant for predators. So they don't necessarily need to sleep all night long, and they can be active at night. If you go by a roost of crows or starlings or grackles, you'll hear them chattering all through the night. Oh, someone asked if they're saying barn owl houses are being put up in fields in Florida to replace, to help farmers that are, or to replace the use of pesticides. We're using barn owls as a natural rodent control. Great thing. Is this common practice across the country? Not that I know of, but that would be a wonderful thing to do, to put up more barn owl boxes and attract them. That's also one reason why people put up purple martin condominiums and put up bluebird boxes and tree swallow boxes and bat boxes. Don't forget bats. Bats are also really great at mosquito control because bats are flying around at night when the mosquitoes are out. Do barred owls live in the whole state of Arkansas, and will they nest in a box if you build one? Yes, barred owls are found all across Arkansas, wherever there are woods around. And whether or not one nests in the box, well, who knows? I mean, there's a chance, like any box you put out there for any species, a bird may never nest in it. It may find the nest box immediately. It may take years. You just never know. But if you don't put the nest box up, well, they won't nest in it, right? Do great horned owls and barred owls or barn owls prey on much smaller screech owls? Oh yeah, they sure do. Great horned owls especially will take on other owls. So yeah, that's one thing. If you are owling and you want to do playback and try to see if owls are out there, you start with the smaller owl first and work your way up. You don't want to play a great horned owl call and instantly cause all the screech owls to panic and shut up and fly away. So you start with the screech owl call, see if anything responds, and then go up from there. Thank you. So my coworker says that one website says the origin of nightjar is they're so called for the jarring sound made by the male when the female is brooding. Someone also wants to know if they have an inner clock that wakes them up before the sun comes up. I imagine birds do have an internal clock like we do, that they can also just see that it's getting dark as well. And are bobwhites nocturnal? Bobwhites are mostly diurnal during the daytime and mostly taking cover at night because there's a lot of predators out there at night. Skunks, bobcats, coyotes, great horned owls, and lots of other things. Are whippoorwills threatened? Yes, yes, they are. They're not federally threatened, but whippoorwills and chuck-will's widows are both losing habitat because they need forests, and their forested habitat is slowly being whittled away by the growth of suburbia. I can see that here in the greater Little Rock area too. You can find chuck-will's widows nesting in some of the forest patches that are on the fringes of town, but more and more of those forested patches are disappearing for new development. So those birds are losing ground, and more they're depending on the protected places like the national forests and the wildlife management areas. Now, occasionally during migration, you can get a chuck or a whip in your yard or in your neighborhood. You might hear one, but it's not going to be nesting, certainly, in our suburban areas. Also, whippoorwills, I think chuck-will's widows too, are both birds that are threatened by climate change too. As the climate warms, these birds will be losing their range. Their range will be shrinking in response to warming temperatures. Are birds usually safe during the day from nocturnal predators, or do they hunt at night and sleep during the day? So, during the daytime, there are predators. At nighttime, there are predators. And I guess a bird can't win, right? It's hard being a bird. It's hard being a prey animal because there's lots of things out there that will eat you. But whether a bird is diurnal or nocturnal, in part has to do with avoiding predators, but also in part just has to do with their feeding habits, their nesting habits, and whether or not they're just built for being active at nighttime. Other questions? Well, all right, my friends. Thank you for tuning. Oh, one more. Oh, yeah. So one person has seen chuck-will's widow in Jefferson County. There are other counties where chuck-will's widows are more prominent more of, in Arkansas, more of the central and western counties where it's more forested. That's where you're going to find chuck-will's widows and whippoorwills, and they overlap in central Arkansas. Chuck-will's widows more southern Arkansas, whippoorwills more northern Arkansas, think Ozarks. Do birds need a certain amount of hours to sleep? And do some sleep longer than others? I would assume that would vary by species. And again, the birds don't sleep like we do. Their brains are wired differently. And a lot of birds will sleep for small amounts, little micro naps, or shut half their brain down at a time. Some really cool studies were done on seabirds, like frigate birds. Frigate birds are these master aerial seabirds. They can be on the wing for days at a time and just circle around the ocean. And so scientists were wondering, how the heck do these birds sleep if they have to be on the wing? They can't land on the water because their feathers are not waterproof. So they have to always be on the wing, day and night. And it was found by studying their brains that, again, they shut down half their brain, or they go high up in the sky and they glide down. And as they're gliding, their brain takes these little tiny micro naps, just enough to refresh themselves. It is remarkable how birds manage with very little sleep. And of course, there are migratory birds, songbirds, shorebirds, seabirds that migrate over the open ocean for days at a time. Some shorebirds go from Alaska to Hawaii and then Hawaii to Australia, nonstop, days over the open ocean, constantly flying. It's remarkable that they have the energy to do that. And again, their brains are wired so they can take these micro naps and continue to sleep, continue to migrate as they are sleeping. It is really cool. how many owls are on my life list and how many owl species are there in the world? I don't know the answer to either of those questions. I've seen quite a few owls out there in, across North America and other countries. And I'm not sure how many owls there are, but I'm sure we can find out how many owls there are and post that on Facebook. Are albatrosses night birds? No, albatrosses are, they're both really. Albatrosses are seabirds, and they, again, spend long periods, many months over the open ocean, and they can land on the water and rest. But I imagine that albatrosses also will fly and feed on the wing during the nighttime. Are barn owls as prevalent as great horned or barred owls? They are not. They're more sparsely distributed than great horned and barred owls. Barn owls are widespread, but they do tend to also be more secretive than great horned and barred owls. Just a lot harder to see. So that's why you may have never seen one. And for me, it's just a matter of luck, whether I flush one from a deer stand or one time on I-40 stopped at a gas station and saw one on the edge of the gas station illuminated by the street lights, and it was sitting in a tree. Thank you. More than 200 species of owl in the world. They're found all around the world except Antarctica. And there are many owls that are found only on certain continents, and there are some owls that are restricted to one island and are found nowhere else in the world. They're a pretty diverse bunch. Some owls are fishing owls, and they will catch fish from the water like an osprey will. It's pretty amazing. Any other questions? All right, my friends, we'll call it a wrap here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I've got one more presentation scheduled for this week on Thursday at noon Central Time. So tune in then, and also go to our website and see more presentations. Have a great evening and go listen for some owls.